When I was around 17, I got out of bed to get my dog out of his kennel and feed him. As I passed one of the cabinets, a voice whispered in my ear, "Wake up." I could feel the breath and everything, and literally just froze for a few seconds, and ran upstairs telling myself, "What the F?" repeatedly. It has messed with me to this day. I'd rather have heard absolutely anything else, because wake up just messes with you. My aunt and uncle owned a house that had quite a history. It was a funeral home, a hospital, and a sanatorium long before they bought it, with the dream of turning it into a bed and breakfast. There are 3 instances that really stick out. We were emptying the basement out of old trash and we found a false wall revealing a secret cabinet with a hand in a jar. No idea what the hell it was all about, but later on that day, we were all eating pizza and my cousins and I were wandering and ended up at the base of the stairs to the basement where we could hear what sounded like children's whispers and laughter. Number 2. My cousins and I were going to clean the boxes out of the attic. It was pitch black, so my cousin grabs a flashlight and starts to head up. As soon as he gets into the attic, the flashlight dies. He comes down and it works again. But when he gets into the attic, it dies again. He climbed down and shined the light on the wall into the attic, where again, the light died. The light would not shine in the attic. Number 3. My cousins and I were in the balcony room. Supposedly it belonged to a rich elderly lady that was dying of tuberculosis and paid for this room to be redone with a walkout balcony overseeing the town. My cousins and I walked out on the edge of the balcony and gazed out when all of a sudden the door about 15 feet away slammed shut. It was the dead of the winter and there was no wind. It slammed with so much force I had to really throw my shoulder into it to open it up again. My uncle, who was downstairs working, didn't hear a thing. There were a few other explainable things that had happened, but those just stick with me. 10 years later. I saw my deceased ex-husband in the kitchen. I was watching TV in my living room in the middle of the day, kept hearing the sound, like someone was jiggling their change around, and it was loud, as if they were in the room with me. I paused my TV, yet the sound persisted. So I started to look around the room, and when I got to the kitchen, I saw him standing there. He was looking around as if taking stock of my apartment. Oh, and he was jiggling change in one hand, while flipping a quarter in between his fingers with the other hand. Something he did a lot when he was alive. He turned his head and saw me frozen, staring at him. The expression on his face was new I would never forget. His eyes got huge. He kind of tilted his head forward with the expression like, "You can see me?" I don't know how long we stared at each other for, but I turned away when I started to hear my cat ripping up the effing carpet again in the other room. When I turned back to my ex, he was gone. It's worth noting that he had only been dead for a couple months. Some Romanian woman I work with told me that the dead stick around for 3 months before crossing over. I don't know about all that, but I know without a shadow of doubt what I saw that day. When I was 16, an uncle, my dad's brother, passed unexpectedly. Weeks later, I had a dream about him, and he told me to quit smoking cigarettes. It was way more involved, but it's been 20 plus years, so I don't remember the rest. A month or so later, I mentioned the dream to my parents, and my dad started crying, got up, and walked away. Apparently, he had dreamed of talking to his brother too. And he told my dad that he, the uncle, needed to talk to me. My remote once jumped off the TV by itself, the old school box type of television, when I was watching with my girlfriend. It didn't fall or slide off. We actually saw it take a leap, as if somebody threw it. We both just sat there, really confused, before even questioning it out loud. I worked for an online retailer warehouse for a few months. There were 2 depressing windows that obviously were the bare minimum required for zoning. I probably walked by 1,000 times a day. Outside, you see concrete retaining wall and some trucks. Obviously, after a while, I'd barely see out of my periphery. Walls, trucks, wall. Till one day, I saw trucks and then, second window, pigs. It was only a second, but I definitely saw a bunch of massive pigs in fenced-in areas with rolling hills beyond. Of course, when I look back, no pigs. For the next few weeks, I stared out the windows when I went past, always seeing nothing but a wall. It was only when I got lazy and stopped paying attention that it happened again. Pigs, hill, and look back and it's gone. Apparently the land used to be a farm. Never found out if it was a pig farm. I like to think it's flesh of the past and not the ghost of bacon. January 1st, 2003. A stretch of road between 2 coastal towns in Australia. It was dark and stormy night. No, really, it was. Driving around with my partner, I noticed a car coming up behind us, traveling very fast. It was a single-lane road, so we couldn't move over. I said to my partner, "This guy's in a hurry. Let him overtake you." My partner agreed and he moved left as soon as there was an overtaking lane. The car pulled up beside us and then disappeared. There was nowhere it could have gone. We sat in silence for a few minutes, and I said, "Did you see that?" He said, "Yep." One time, me and my husband was watching TV in our living room. We decided to kick his shoes off while sitting on the couch, and both shoes landed in front of the TV stand, on the floor, on their sides. About 30 minutes into the TV show we were watching, one of his shoes, out of the effing blue, moved upwards by itself. I froze up on the couch, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw my husband staring at his shoe, looking startled. Then I said to my husband, "Did you see that?" He replied, "Yeah." My eyes started to get really huge, and he said, I was about to ready flip out, and he said, "It's okay, calm down, I'll burn some cedar." So then he did, and all felt well again. We're native, so we just smudged that hoe out of our house. I had a dream. My dog gone to a distant corner of our heavily wooded backyard and dug a hole to get out, which was odd because he wasn't a digger. He was stuck on the other side of the chain link fence because the hole was steep angle and he couldn't squeeze back through. I lifted the fence enough for him to get back. The next day I got home and the yard was eerily quiet. He'd usually run up to greet me. I thought of the dream and walked straight to the corner where I found him waiting on the other side of the fence and let him in. My grandparents had a big farm when I was growing up, and all the grandkids would help work over the summer if we were out of school. Anytime we saw a rabbit, we were supposed to get it with the hoe and grab the shotgun. I was around 12 or so when I saw my first little rabbit in the beans, and I didn't want my grandfather to see it, so I tried to chase it off. Followed it into the brush on the land, and for whatever reason, I just kept following it, because usually I lose sight of them pretty quickly once I hit the brush. Kept following it until I found it clearly, an old barn ruin. Pretty normal to happen upon where I'm from. They're fun to look inside, so I went in. It was weirdly kept up, with antique tools in great shape and fresh hay. I worried I'd cross into our neighbor's property, so I hightailed it out of there. I asked my grandfather about it. He said our land went way far past what I had described, and I couldn't have left our land in a short amount of time I was gone. So he followed me out there. We couldn't find it. I checked every summer I worked there, never found it again. Not creepy, but it always drove me crazy where that stupid barn went. There's this old abandoned hotel a couple hours away from me. It's not like a modern hotel, but like an old Victorian house that was turned into a bed and breakfast. It's totally boarded up. Big fence around it with barbed wire. Apparently, it's pretty damn haunted. In high school, me and some friends went to go check it out. It's in the middle of a circular road, not a roundabout, but you can go around several times before feeding back onto the main road. It takes about 90 seconds to go around this circle. Anyways, the first time we drive through, all the shades of the windows are drawn. We drive around again. Only half the shades are drawn. The next time we drive by, all the shades are open. We drove around one last time and all the shades were drawn again. We freaked out and drove the hell out of there. In the interior of BC, I spent a lot of time exploring the truck. Found loads of abandoned buildings and cabins, but the coolest place that a friend showed me was an abandoned hippie commune deep in the forest. There were some crazy house designs. One looked like an ark. One was a 40-foot teepee clad with aluminum. The place was clearly built by people who had little building experience, but there was lots of creativity and motivation. There was a lot of weird stuff that I found on the property. I even found a bike that was stolen off me the year prior. Was driving through Illinois to get to Chicago about a decade ago with a group of friends, and we stopped at a Taco Bell. First thing we noticed was the workers were acting very odd. Everything they said was monotone and rehearsed. After sitting in this fairly busy restaurant for a bit, we kind of just looked at each other at the same time and realized none of the conversations happening around us made any sense. The people were speaking, and it was English, but the sentences weren't logical. They were just saying words at each other. We didn't say much about it until we got outside, at which point we all freaked out and confirmed each other's experiences all at once, and got the F out of there. We jokingly referred to the place as the NPC Training Center, since people didn't seem to be real. They were learning how to be human or something. Still freaks me out. A couple years ago, a buddy and I got turned around on a side road in rural North Missouri. I had no service for GPS, and it was pouring rain, so I headed south towards my destination, hoping to run into a main highway. We ended up coming to the town of Skidmore, Missouri. It's a tiny town in the middle of nothing, but there's something dark about that place. Infamously, in the 80s, a man known as the town bully was killed in broad daylight in the middle of town there. Not one person spoke up about who killed him, and it's never been solved despite many witnesses. There have been disappearances and a brutal crime a few years ago involving a baby being cut out of a woman's womb. Keep in mind the town is only 270 people. As we drove down the main drag, several people gave us blank but intimidating stare, completely unnerving. Once we got out of town, my buddy mentioned he'd had a sense of impending doom or danger as we drove through. Weirdly enough, I've been feeling the same way. I had never had such a persistent gut feeling of danger like that before. We agreed to never, ever effing go through Skidmore again. There's something seriously evil about that town. It shouldn't exist. Not just one, but there's a whole lot of places in rural New Zealand that will scare the crap out of someone who isn't used to it. Hell, even some of my Kiwi friends would sometimes be like, F no, I'm not hiking out there with you guys. Good luck. But if I had to choose one, we were doing a 5-day hike, had pretty good maps and directions. There was a lot of naturally funded huts throughout the island, very well marked. We found this one random hut that was definitely not on the maps, with a bunch of older guys just hammered partying inside. And this was way out there. These guys could have just walked up from a town to party for the afternoon. No gear whatsoever, just the craziest looking. 60 plus guys hammered in this random unmarked cabin. When we came back later, the place was absolutely empty and musty, so they packed up their trash and stuff, but it seemed all gross and dirty. We were all kind of baffled. Did we actually meet all these crazy hillbilly old men partying in the middle of nowhere? They obviously weren't going up there to clean it up. And where the hell did this cabin even come from just in the middle of these mountains? And how the hell do we randomly hike up there with cases of beer, booze, and speakers? Not creepy, just weird to me. A music store seemed to just show up in my town. I I lived there for 3 years and never saw it. Went in, and the guy had one bass guitar in the store. Me, being a bassist, played it and fell in love. Bought it, and the next week I was in town, the store was totally empty, and it looked like it hadn't been open in a long time. Got a new bass out of it, though, so I'm cool with it being a spooky ghost store. In the 7th grade, I had a friend that lived near a beach on a bay of Lake Michigan. One day, in early May, it reached 70 degrees. Nearly unheard of for that time of the year in northern Wisconsin. My 2 friends, including the beach friend, excitedly rode our bikes down to the beach to maybe dip our toes in, expecting still frigid waters, and then tan for the rest of the afternoon. The water, though, was surprisingly warm, like bath water warm. In this particular area of the bay, the water was shallow for about half a mile out. We joyously splashed around, wading deeper and deeper till it was about chest deep. So we dunked each other and swam with a band. I started to feel sick. Bad headache, nausea, wobbly. Just then, my other 2 friends mentioned that they also felt sick. We headed back to the shore, nearly crawling by the time we got out. The 3 of us collapsed under a tree and fell asleep for 2-ish hours. When we woke up, we talked about how weird it was. I dipped my toe back in the water and was freezing cold. To this day, I have no idea what was in there. I do know that there is a chemical plant in town that used to manufacture things like Agent Orange, and their practices were known to be less than environmentally conscious. I have never touched that water since. I saw my neighbors walking around slow outside with oil lanterns. It was really weird. A giant glass spear-shaped rod fell out of the sky and shattered in the parking lot of a place I worked at as a security guard. Wee hours of the morning, about 2 a.m. The asphalt glowed blue for about 10 yards around the impact site. My partner and I saw it, heard it, and felt it hit. We collected a couple of fist-sized chunks and put them in our trucks. Then the men in black showed up. 2 black Suburbans with government plates, 4 men with black suits and ties in each. They collected all the rest of the pieces and left. Never said a word. Didn't try to shake us down for any other pieces that we surely would have grabbed. They completely ignored us. We went back to dispatch office and replayed the video over and over. Still have no explanation for it. In Madagascar, on a night walk in the forest, several hours' drive from Mahajanga, we've been out chasing a rumor of a pygmy hippo. Turned out to be a wild boar. Right in front of me, I saw a 4-legged animal similar in size to a fossa. However, what was different about it said 3 white stripes running lengthwise down its body. Well, on the one side I saw. We told everyone when we got back to the camp and got sat down with the book to go through so we could point out what it was. It was not in the book. No one believed us, but I know what I saw. I was so frustrated, no one come look for it. There is an undiscovered predator in them forests. A UFO over a farm field in Waxahachie, Texas. It had been 13 years, and up to now, I've only told 6 people, because I just can't fathom, to this day, what me and my kids saw. Ball lightning. In my house. I was smartly doing the dishes during a thunderstorm and saw a blue orb out of the corner of my eye. I turned to watch it float for a second or so. It dissipated with a ridiculously loud thunderclap. I decided I was done doing dishes for the time being. It took out the gigabit ports on our router at the time. Thankfully, we just moved into our house, so we had the router larger than the return period. Actually, I think it completely took out the new Wi-Fi router, which is what got returned. The gigabit ports were on an older switch it was connected to. I had a USB that I lost 4 years prior turn up in stormwater drain nearly 300 kilometers away from where I lost it. It was dirty, scratched, visibly worse for wear, but still worked. Inside had exactly identical files to what I could remember when I lost it, with a single addition of some old top-down shooter game called Crimson Land. A horse's shadow moving by itself with no horse in sight. Weird, but I know it's 100% true. I once was working on a house with my boss and a few coworkers. It's like 12 a.m., we're about to leave. I go upstairs and grab the ladder. And I crap you not, a creature. A pale, skinny, butt, booty, naked creature ran past the doorway of another room in the corner of my eye. Immediately ran back downstairs with the ladder. I haven't talked about it till now. I was at a skate park a few years ago. I was fishing at one lake one morning. It's broad daylight. I could see pretty clearly. Anyways, I heard a sound of something on the other side of the lake. It sounded like something big moving through the underbrush. I could see the bushes and small trees moving aside, but I couldn't see what it was. The movement was getting closer to the shore. Then the bushes nearest the shore parted as if something was moving them, but there was no person or animal standing. Nothing. After a pause, there was a big splash in the lake, like the bigger than a person could ever make by cannonballing. I still saw no creature, but the splash subsided. A V-shaped wake formed in the surface and moved across the lake, then grew smaller, then vanished, as if whatever was swimming deeper. I didn't wait to see or not see whatever it was resurfacing. I ran straight back to the car and drove away. No pictures, no video, no proof. So I never told anyone about it. So I wasn't a child, but I do have this weird glitch story. I warn you, it isn't scary. In fact, it's so stupid, I don't think I can make it up if I tried. A few years back, I wanted to do taco night. I have this big frying pan. I used to make homemade tortillas. I get the ingredients and go in the cupboard for a pan. It isn't there. I called my wife, asking her if she moved it. She didn't. Perplexed, I rummaged through my kitchen and nothing. Nothing else in the house is missing. We have security system cameras and a dog who barks anytime someone is at the door. No one has been in our house but us. But the pan is just gone. We actually searched the whole house. The situation's so stupidly strange. Taco night was canceled. About 2 weeks go by. Nothing out of the ordinary occurs. I open up the cupboard to get a saucepan. And there's the effing frying pan. It's right where it's supposed to be. Place where two of us checked on multiple occasions that first night. The pan blinked out of existence, and then 2 weeks, or at least something like 2 weeks, it blinked right back in. Such a dumb story, but it happened. I don't know where it went or why, but decided to stick around since. After my dad passed away, I remember being in a dream where I woke up in a dream hearing the sound of his voice from downstairs. I jumped out of bed and looked out my window and saw a dark figure in our garden. Then I heard my dad's voice again, which woke me up for real. Ran downstairs and saw the back door was left unlocked and opened by my mom, who had fallen asleep on the sofa downstairs. I locked it and went back to bed. Found out the next day a few houses on our street had been robbed that night. No one ever believes that it really happened, or think I had a dream later, or just got confused on the order of events. But it 100% happened, and it's the craziest thing that ever happened to me. I'm really skeptical of the paranormal, don't believe in ghosts or anything, but I cannot make sense of that dream. Growing up, maybe 8, 10 years old, me and my cousins and brother were playing to see who dug the deepest hole. Around 5 p.m., I'm from Central America on the Caribbean. It starts to get dark around that time. I was digging, could almost fit my little arm almost to the elbow by then. I was a bit far from my cousins to their left. When I was elbow deep and was pulling dirt out, I was suddenly in shock because I could see a smoky white hand following me as I was pulling my arm out of the hole, as if it was to grab me. It was something smoky, not with texture or full form. But at the same time, I was surprised and calling my cousins and brothers, it disappeared. Till this day, I'm 42, I cannot explain and relive it like it was yesterday. I fell out of bed in the middle of the night. I stood up and saw that I was in the kitchen of the house we lived in 1 year prior. I remember looking out the window to confirm. As I looked around, the house was full of items I did not recognize. Different furniture, different pictures on the wall. I walked down the hallway in the dark and opened the door to my old room. It was my current room. I went inside, shut the door, and went back to bed. I immediately got back up, opened the door to check, and everything was back to normal. When I was a toddler, I was living with my grandmother. One day I wake up in the morning, unusual early. It was still kind of dark outside, and I had dreamed of my great-grandmother. It just felt kind of weird. Went downstairs to tell my grandmother, and she said, "I got a weird feeling too. I'll go see if she's okay. You stay here and have your breakfast, okay?" But little me just couldn't withstand the feeling in my guts. She was worried too, right? So I silently followed after her. It was just down 2 streets. When my grandmother went into her house, I caught up with her, and she told me to stay at the bottom of the stairs. Of course, I wouldn't. I had come this far. So after a minute, I stuck up the stairs. First room on the left was the stairs, my great-grandmother's room. She was in bed, smiling as best she could, as she told my grandmother she loved her. She even noticed me as she took her last breath, but my grandmother noticed me and hugged me in tears. It felt so right to be there. My grandmother was there for her mother, and I was there for her. And it just felt like called us there, waking us up even. Granny wasn't even mad. We went to church that day, lit up a candle, and we were both grieving together. My old house had creaky floorboards and overtime. You could tell who was walking around just based on the sound, the pace of the creaks, and the noise of the person's slippers hitting the ground. Stay with me. I always slept with my slippers right next to my bed, taking them off as I got in. One night, after everyone had already gone to sleep, I heard someone walking around 2 a.m. or so. The noise was weird. Definitely didn't sound like anyone in my family. The steps started walking towards my room, and I realized I had left my door open. Me being the scared little kid I was, I hid under the covers, hoping I was imagining it. I heard the footsteps come to my room and stop at the foot of my bed. I distinctly remember the feeling of the corner of my bed shifting down, as if someone just took a seat. It was right near my feet, too, so I could feel something. Closed my eyes so tight, and a few minutes later, the bed shifted up again, and the footsteps walked away. I remember feeling so scared that I prayed and ended up falling asleep. When I woke up the next day, my door was still open. When I got out to put my slippers on, they had moved closer to the door, and they were sitting there perfectly together. To this day, I can't explain it, but there's a reason why I hate horror movies. I was about 7. Small village, Ireland, in the 90s, just potting around a field near my house. Next thing I know, it was raining wooden ice lolly sticks. Lasted a few seconds, and I was finding them for days all over the town afterwards. Nobody else seemed to have witnessed the actual rain, but I collected hundreds of them in a couple of days. Still remember it vividly, and my parents remember my obsession with ice lolly sticks that lasted about a week. Grew up outside the city, so I took a bus to school. I was always alone at that stop, and only one traffic light right above it. One day there was someone at the stop, walking back and forth waiting, but the closer I came, the less of the figure I saw, until it was gone. I had an imaginary friend Sam when I was little, like all kids. I thought he was real, and I could see him. Time passed and I stopped seeing Sam. I was 10 now, and I was pretty close-minded, so the thought of anomalies such as a ghost never crossed my mind. So it was 8 p.m., and I was sitting in the living room watching TV when I hear this voice of a 5-year-old asking me to come and play. I was freaked, but also didn't know where the sound was coming from. I had been feeling to look over at the kitchen table from the couch, and I saw this kid staring at me. When I tried to get up, it was like time froze. Then it unfroze, and he was gone. The freaky thing was, it looked like my imaginary friend Sam. It was really strange. I can't explain it. It wasn't a dream, because after, I got up and told my mom. About a year ago, I was at my parents' ranch around midnight. They were out of town for a month, so I was just hanging out there. The ranch is surrounded by woods, and there are no other houses nearby. I got bored and started exploring the woods with a flashlight, and I swear to God, I heard a woman singing a lullaby. I froze in horror, and after about 20 seconds of debating whether I should investigate, I ran back to the house and tried to settle down. To this day, I still have no clue as to what I heard. My father-in-law had passed away. We were back in his hometown preparing funeral arrangements. I had never known my father-in-law to be a devout Catholic, but I knew he was a member of the Knights of Columbus. He was a Knight of the 4th degree and they have emblems and pins representing a dove with its beak pointing down to the earth. We had cleaned areas of his house and found these pins. I remember asking my husband what it meant. His brother told me the fourth degree. I was surprised because it was very intriguing to me. I loved my husband's father like my own father. He was a very sweet, caring, thoughtful man. I was sad and trying to be strong for my husband, so the stress was overwhelming. Anyway, I had flown home for a week earlier, and my husband called the folks when I arrived home. The house was empty, and no one had been watching the house. So I was taking off my jewelry in a small bowl. I keep my everyday items. I had touched something small. I'm yammering away with my dad. I pick up the item. I have no clue what it is. I turn it over and see a dove with its beak pointing down to the earth. I quickly stop talking, and my dad's asking if everything's okay. I can't speak. I just yell, "Oh my God," and start sobbing. I finally tell my father I found the pin my father-in-law had at his house, but this one looks shiny and new. I've never seen this one before, and certainly didn't take a pin with me. My father's very open to paranormal events, and he let me know that my father-in-law had left me a message. I called my husband and told him. He said he'd been stressed out with family, didn't know what to do, and asked out loud what he needed and his dad's advice. And I called him about the pin. When I was about 4 years old, too young to remember, my grandmother passed away. At the time, I had no concept of what death was, or thought it meant I'd never see my grandma again. I hardly remember her, but I do have one extremely vivid memory that I can still picture crystal clear even 17 years later. About a week after her death, I was playing in my backyard by my shed doing typical toddler things when I heard my name get called. I turned towards the door of my shed, and there stood my grandmother. Didn't seem odd at all, considering I didn't really understood that she was gone forever. She asked me to go grab a cookie from inside so she could watch me eat it, and to tell my mom that she loves her very much. When I went inside, my mom had quite the shell-shocked face when I told her this, but gave me the cookie regardless. When I left back to see my grandma, my mom took a look out the window to see what was going on and found me eating a cookie, talking to thin air. Yet I clearly remember seeing and talking to my grandma for a good 5 minutes. Eventually, she told me to go and to treat my mom with lots of love. She walked into the shed, and I chased after her, only to find nothing when I got inside. Looking back on it, and realizing what happened now, it doesn't freak me out at all. It's just an amazing paranormal experience that I will never forget. When I was growing up, I lived in an area that had been a big Confederate camp during Civil War. There were like 3,000 soldiers spread out over this area. My dad developed the neighborhood we lived in, and when they were doing the site work, they found a lot of bullets and buttons and other detritus. Our house was brand new when we moved in, but built in this old camp area. All the kids in the neighborhood had weird stories about their houses. Mine was that we had this old wooden clock with a glass face. That was my great-grandmother's. My mom tried to have it repaired, but it never worked. It sat on an entry table. One day, I hear from upstairs like chimes. I get curious as it's just me and my cousin in the house. This is before cell phones, and she had a back room reading a book. So I come downstairs, and that damn clock is going crazy, chiming, and the glass face is open, and the damn hands are going around and around. The damn thing is shaking and getting louder and louder. I hear my cousin coming up the front of the house, and I'm yelling for her to hurry up, get back here and look at this. I'm staring at the clock going, bat crap, and see her turn the corner to the entry from the corner, and my no lie, right as she turns the corner, the clock goes still and silent. Face audibly snaps closed. She was like, "What the hell was that?" And I'm freaked out, saying it was the clock. She could hear it from the back of the house, so she believed me. The house was pretty weird, but in most obvious ways, like knocking on the door, getting overwhelming feeling to get out of the house, like that second, or hearing someone call my name when I knew I was alone. Alligators. A young woman in town married a man from another part of the country. He was a nice fellow, and they got along pretty well together. There was only one problem. Every night he'd go swimming in the river. Sometimes he'd be gone all night long, and she'd complain about how lonely she was. This couple had 2 sons. As soon as the boys could walk, their father began to teach them how to swim. And when they got to be old enough, he took them swimming in the river at night. Often they would stay there all night long. The young woman would stay home all by herself. After a while, she began to act in a strange way. At least that's what the neighbors said. She told them that her husband was turning into an alligator and that he was trying to turn the boys into alligators. Everybody told her there was nothing wrong with a man taking his son swimming. That was a natural thing to do. And when it came to alligators, there just weren't any nearby. Everybody knew that. Early one morning, the young woman came running into town from the direction of the river. She was soaking wet. She said a big alligator and 2 little alligators had pulled her in and had tried to get her to eat a raw fish. They were her husband and her sons, she said. They wanted her to live with them, but she had gotten away. Her doctor decided she had lost her mind, and he had her put in a hospital for a while. After that, nobody saw her husband and boys again. They just disappeared. But now and then, a fisherman would tell us about seeing alligators in the river at night. Usually it was 1 big alligator and 2 small ones, but people said they were just making it up. Everybody knows there aren't any alligators around here.
Hey, I'm Connor from Bigfoot Anon, and I'm always on the hunt for the next big adventure. When you're on the trail for long hours, you build up quite the stench, enough to drive any skunk ape or yeti away. Luckily, I'm on the quest now for the solution to all my problems. Yeti bars. They do exist. Available in tons of different scents and fragrances. Check out YetiBars.net for more and use my code BA10 for a special offer. Clean like a beast. Yeti Bars!